Okay, we are good to go.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the OWEB Grants Committee. My name is Dan Brown, for the record, and I co-chair the grant committee with Barbara Boyer, who is also on the Zoom call today. We want to remind you all that this virtual meeting is being streamed live on OWEB's YouTube channel, and it's also being recorded. For those of you watching on YouTube, the meeting materials are in the board and committee section of the OWEB website. Just for clarification, there are some materials there that are from previous meetings that aren't necessarily relevant to today's meeting. But the agenda is there if you want to look at it and follow along. It's towards the bottom of the page. Also there you can find past meeting recordings. I'd like to call on our committee meetings, committee members now, and OWEB staff members to introduce themselves. And I will, why don't I call on you, Barbara, first?
Good morning, Barbara Boyer. I sit on the OWEB board as the Board of Agriculture member.
Great. And I'm just gonna popcorn around because I'm on a new computer this morning and I'm not used to my screen. So Eric Williams, you're next in what I can see.
All right, thanks, Dan. Eric Williams, I'm the grant program manager at OWEB.
All right, and how about you, Liz?
Liz Agpow, and I sit on the board of OWEB from the Board of Forestry.
All right, Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Lindsay McClary, Public at Large voting member on the OWEB board.
All right, how about you, Chris?
Good morning, everybody. Chris Allen, OWEB board member representing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
All right, Jillian, I'm seeing you next.
Good morning, everyone. Jillian McCarthy, Partnerships Coordinator at OWEB.
And Lisa?
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Sharplow Hansen, Executive Director at OWEB.
All right, Denise.
Good morning, Denise Hoffert, Partnerships Coordinator at OWEB.
Ken?
Morning, everybody. My name is Ken Fetcho, and I am OWEB's Effectiveness Monitoring Coordinator and Tribal Liaison.
Right, and Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Labhart, voting member representing ODF and W Commission.
And the other Liz.
Good morning, everyone. Liz Redon. I'm one of the region program representatives at OWEB covering the Willamette.
And I think the only other thing I'm seeing here is the OWEB, which I believe is you, Nicole.
That is correct. Nicole Bettinardi, OWEB's executive assistant.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. The agenda for today has 3 additional items, maybe 4. One of them is public comment, and my understanding is we have nobody that has signed up for verbal comments today, and we also did not receive any written comments prior to the meeting today. So I think that'll be a pass. And then the next 3 agenda items are to discuss revisiting the name of the stakeholder engagement grant offering, to preview the October open solicitation awards, and to preview cohort 4 implementation focused investment partnership application review process. I think I got that right. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about those agenda topics? And if not, then I will, we're going to skip the public comment one. And so why don't I just hand it over to Eric Williams, who's going to start with the agenda item to discuss revisiting the name of the stakeholder engagement grant offering.
All right, thanks, Dan. Co-chair Boyer, members of the committee, Eric Williams, Grant Program Manager. This item is on the agenda at the request of the committee from our last meeting in June to spend a little bit of time on this topic because it is quite an important one. And yet it's kind of simple and straightforward. But I just want to give you a little bit of background on it first. The stakeholder engagement offering is one of 4 offerings that we have under our open solicitation grant program. And we also offer stakeholder engagement under the Focus Investment Partnership Initiative. And we had started that offering back in 2016. And just for additional historical context, when OWEB's constitutional mission was first established from the 1998 Measure 66 ballot measure, the authorization for OWEB grants included something called outreach grants. And at the time, the authorization was there to do things like run programs for school kids on watershed, just general watershed education. When our authorizing language was amended by Measure 76, which passed in 2010, the authority for providing funds for grants for broad education outreach purposes was removed from our statutory authority, our constitutional authority and our statutory authority. And at that time, we had to change what was the education outreach offering so that it lined up with what the constitutional language says we can do. And basically that is to do engagement that is, quote, necessary for eligible restoration and acquisition projects. So it can be a lot of things, anything from kitchen table meetings with landowners to facilitate development of restoration projects, to working with communities to help people understand why a project like, say, a dam removal is necessary and what the community benefits might be from funding that project. So that the eligibility in it is quite broad. The purpose of it is really that engagement. And I think probably many of you have seen reference in other formats to the term stakeholder in particular being offensive to particularly tribal communities, because the term itself originates from the ability to stake a claim. And staking a claim was done through the Land Donation Act to provide land to white colonists that had previously been owned and occupied essentially by Indian tribes. And so that term stakeholder is considered offensive to some communities for obvious reasons. And what we wanted to talk about here in this format is to see whether or not OWEB should change the name of that offering. It's something we can do administratively, but we wanted to work through the grants committee to daylight the issue before making a change. And yes, the term stakeholder appears in our administrative rules. And if we did decide to go forward with administrative changes to the grant, to simply the name of the grant offering, we would then proceed to make those administrative changes in the rules as we're addressing different sections of our rules. And in addition to that background, I'd like to offer Lindsay the opportunity to speak to this as well. Lindsay is the committee member who raised it at the last meeting. If you'd like to, Lindsay, feel free, please, to offer some comments as background.
Yeah, thank you so much for that really excellent framing of the issue and where we've come and where we're hoping to go. Really appreciate staff putting this on the agenda, spending time talking about it, and then allowing time at the committee here to talk about it. I fully support the change of the grant offering name. And like Eric mentioned, I think that some communities, especially tribal communities, it can be an offensive term. And so, you know, serving on the OWEB board as a public at-large voting member, I think it's important that we have eyes wide open moving forward, trying to reconcile things that have happened. And then would just also like to mention that I am employed by the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So I really am excited about this opportunity. I think it is doing our best to create a community that is open and safe and sensitive. So just really appreciate the opportunity. I'm hopeful that we'll have full committee and board support on this, and just really appreciate staff's time. So thanks for looking into this and creating a positive environment moving forward.
Great, thanks, Lindsay.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, that maybe Lindsay or Eric has given more thought to this than I have. And do you have a recommendation that you would offer?
We do. Thanks, Mark. In talking this through, we realized that it's pretty easy to overcomplicate things. And in this case, we really don't need to, because what we're talking about is simply engagement. And we would just call them engagement grants. And in terms of who you're engaging with, it's going to be project-based, of course. It could be a small group of landowners in a watershed somewhere, as I mentioned earlier, it could be an entire community, depending on whatever is, as the constitutional language says, necessary for developing those eligible restoration and acquisition projects.
Barbara, go for it. You got your hand up.
Thank you. So I fully support this. On some of the other boards I sit on, we have changed. We have taken this term out of our language. So I really appreciate it being brought forward here in this arena. I have a couple of questions. So it is an administrative rule, the word stakeholder. So would you, when you open up certain rules, will you just change it at that time, or will you open everything up?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. I think to maintain everyone's sanity, we would do that as those sections of rules are opened up. And again, I think, you know, we can create grant offerings administratively in advance of those rule changes. I don't think this is something that needs to have the rule change before we implement it, because it's not changing any of our processes for how we solicit and review and make recommendations for grants. However, we think it's important enough to make the change as quickly and efficiently as we can.
Awesome, thank you.
Ben, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I really appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to add, in addition to what Eric and Lindsay mentioned, is that the term, not only is the term stakeholder offensive, it is inappropriate when you're talking about tribes. Tribes are sovereign nations. And so to refer to them as a stakeholder sort of diminishes their standing, their legal standing, their voice, and their rights. And so I just wanted to add that to the record as well. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Ken. Any other comments? I really appreciate the issue being raised. And I also very much appreciate the simplification that you suggest, Eric, on just striking the word. I unfortunately use that word a lot, and need to change my own patterns and behavior around that. So I was kind of hoping I would come up with another word that I could steal, but that's okay. That's my problem. And what I'm curious about process-wise is this something that we recommend to the full board? Is that sort of the next step to make this happen?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dan. It isn't something the board needs to approve.
Okay.
However, we do want to make sure it's daylighted to the full board. So what we're thinking is if we could include this in this committee's report to the full board at the October meeting, and perhaps make this one an oral report rather than just a written only report, so that if other board members have comments about it, that would give them the opportunity to offer their 2 cents.
That sounds great. And we can talk about this later, but Lindsay, would you be willing to, if we sort of raise this as a oral report, would you be comfortable with us sort of turning it over to you to give that same wonderful explanation that you gave for the committee today?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I would be happy to do that. And while I have the mic, I do just have one question. Is this topic going to the DEI committee at all before our next meeting?
We did not have that on that committee's agenda. We thought we could go from here to, as I said, daylighting it to the full board. It seems that, when you lay it out, as we did today, and Lindsay, as you have, I think, in other forums, we get to consensus pretty quickly. Like, yeah, why would we continue using that word, right? So,
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's an issue that's going to require debate, but I think it's important for the full board to be aware that we're having this discussion and what the recommendation is to proceed for those administrative name changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
And Lindsay, we can most definitely reach out to the chair and co-chair of the DEI committee and give them a courtesy sort of heads up. I think we can do that without getting in trouble,
Certainly,
right?
certainly.
Okay. Because there was on the climate committee call last week, there was some discussion about the interaction of the different subcommittees and how does that take place and where does that take place. And I don't know that we resolved that, but I think it mostly takes place at the full board meetings. But at any rate, this would be a good opportunity for Barbara and I, as the co-chairs of this subcommittee, to just give a courtesy heads up to the other chairs of the other subcommittees that we're going to be bringing this to the full board. Barbara, check in with you. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I like that idea a lot, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this agenda item? All right, Barbara, I'm going to let you walk us through the next one.
All right, the next on, well, there's the open solicitation and the FIP, the open solicitation awards. I guess you want to go there first, Eric?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks,
Okay.
Barbara. And so one of the things that we do in this committee is preview grant awards prior to the board meeting at which the board takes them up. And so I think you're all familiar now with our pattern in terms of our open solicitation grant awards happening in spring and fall each year. And so we're lining up for open solicitation grant awards at the October board meeting in Klamath Falls. And Liz Redon is here with me today as well to preview this for you. And I think, again, you're also fairly familiar with the process, but for those who may be watching at home, the open solicitation grant review process is essentially a 6-month process. Applications come in for this cycle. They came in May, beginning of May. And that set up a review and evaluation process led by Liz and her 5 colleagues, the regional program representatives, who lead their regional review teams to vet the project applications that we receive. And after doing site visits for restoration projects, those review teams meet in either day-long or day-and-a-half-long meetings, depending on the number of applications received, to have discussions on each application in terms of evaluating the applications in alignment with the criteria that are in our administrative rules. And so that's a pretty in-depth conversation that then leads to our staff preparing written evaluations for each application. And it's something that we put a lot of work into and feel is one of the most important things that we do, because those evaluations provide feedback to all of our applicants, whether they're recommended for funding or not. And I think that feedback is important in either case. And we go to great measures to make sure that the feedback that we provide in the evaluations is detailed and specific, so that people are clear on either why or why not their project was recommended or not recommended for funding. And so we've completed those review teams. We're in the process of finalizing those evaluations. They'll be posted probably in about 2 weeks. Our goal is always to get those evaluations posted about a month prior to the board meeting, so that for those applications that maybe either were not recommended for funding or fell below the funding line, it gives those applicants time to put another application together prior to the next deadline, which I think, is it October 31st, Liz, the next deadline? Yeah, no.
It's the 30th.
The 30th, okay.
Whatever, Monday, October 30th.
Right. So if we get those evaluations posted, folks will have a little over a month to prepare new applications for the next cycle. So again, that's also why we feel it's important to provide as much specific feedback in the evaluations as we can. And so as we're finalizing those, the other thing, of course, we do is draw a funding line across the 4 grant types. And this is a cycle that has all 4. You may recall that monitoring applications are only solicited annually instead of every 6 months. And so this fall award cycle has monitoring applications as well as restoration, technical assistance, and engagement grants. And so we will be coming to you with a full set of recommendations for each of those grant types in October. I just wanted to walk through some of the factors that staff are taking into consideration as we're making our recommendations around funding. You adopted a spending plan at the last board meeting in July, which included significant increases for both the restoration and the technical assistance line items in the spending plan. Restoration went up by $2.5 million from $34 million to $36.5 million. So that gives us a little over $9 million a cycle for restoration. In the last 4 or 5 years, COVID accepted, we've been somewhere around the 7.5 to 8 million range. And so that's a fairly significant increase. And technical assistance went from 4.8 million last biennium to 6.8 million this biennium. So pretty healthy increase to cover these 4 cycles in the biennium. Stakeholder engagement and monitoring based on recent demand were kept similar to the funding levels in previous biennia. Couple of items to note about other changes that were incorporated into the spending plan approval in July is that we have removed the match requirement for technical assistance and engagement grants. And we also removed the $75,000 cap on technical assistance requests. However, the solicitation for which you're going to see these recommendations in October went out before those decisions were made by the board. And so the match requirement and the cap are in place for this first cycle in the biennium. The next 3 cycles this biennium will have the new policy changes implemented. So we can expect most likely higher demand in technical assistance because of that, because of the cap removal, and perhaps in engagement as well if we remove the barrier of having to develop 25% match for those applications. And I should note that because statute requires us to have a match, we didn't eliminate the match requirement, we simply reduced it to $1. and for those two offerings, technical assistance and engagement. In terms of the demand that we received this time around, it was fairly similar to the last time we had monitoring grants last fall, October of 2022. This time we had 110 applications requesting about $19 million. And the demand for, the only changes really in demand were monitoring was down by about $1 million from last time, and restoration was up by about $1.5 million. Other than that, fairly consistent demand from what we've been seeing. And while we're in the process of finalizing the project evaluations and the funding lines, I would note that it's likely we'll be recommending to you, to the full board, that we fund about 80% of the recommended restoration and monitoring applications, about 70% of the TA applications, and all of the recommended engagement applications. One final note that I would mention is that we also have revenue from sales of salmon license plates that is earmarked to restoring salmon habitat. And so we will be coming to you with recommendations for about $500,000 in applying salmon plate funding to eligible restoration projects. So we're always excited when that happens. We don't do that every cycle because we don't necessarily have enough built up in the fund to include recommendations each time. But now the pot is built up to about $500,000. So we're going to include those recommendations this time. And what I'd like to do now is see if Liz has anything to add, and also to see if she wants to preview the presentation that you'll see in October.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think you covered everything that we discussed. In terms of presentation, the RPRs are now crafting our presentation, trying to select the projects that we will highlight. So we will each bring a project to highlight from our region. And what we're hoping to build around that is just tell the story about why those projects are recommended based on the language that is in statute that Eric was discussing earlier. Just to give examples of how those two things come together, the application review and the statute language about projects that are restoring fish and wildlife habitat, natural watershed function, and just tell that story around those two pieces. I don't want to give too much away yet.
Dan, you have your hand up? Dan, did you?
Oh, you're on mute, Dan. Yeah.
Sorry, I was talking away and in wasting people's time. Eric, you had mentioned that the recommendation will come forward for about 80% of the restoration applicants, 70% for the TA, all of the engagement. Was there any monitoring grants?
Yeah, that's also at 80% of the recommended.
Okay, sorry that I missed that. And then also for that salmon plate funding restoration money, is that money going to that 80 to that same group of grants, or is that something completely separate?
It is, yes. We pool the salmon plate revenue with the other funding sources, which are lottery and Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund. And we'll show you in the staff report which projects we're selecting specifically for salmon plate funding.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. And I'm sure that kind of info will be included in your presentation, Liz. I was just trying to track it in my P brain, and my recommendation was going to be that you do include that in your presentation. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Mark, you got your hand up.
Yeah, similar question to Dan about the salmon plate funding. I think this would be a great opportunity once the board approves those $500,000 of projects, maybe to do a separate press release from OWEB that highlights we've got $500,000 from people buying these plates, and we're putting them on the ground, and here's some examples of it to kind of showcase where their dollars are going. So just a thought after the board approves these.
Yeah, great suggestion, Mark. We can absolutely do that.
All right. Anything else on this agenda item?
I had one more, just
Okay.
kind of curiosity question. So for the reviews that are shared with the applicants prior to the next open solicitation, which is absolutely fantastic. I think that's, like you say, some of the most important work in giving that feedback. I'm just curious, they're totally cool with them being posted publicly? Just kind of a curiosity question, rather than shared with them kind of individually. It's like hanging out your laundry to dry sort of a thing.
Yeah, it's of course never pleasant when you're not selected for funding. However, I think the way that the evaluations are written, it's in a constructive and positive way. Where there are places that improvements in the applications can be made to make it more competitive, we'll identify those. But we haven't really. I don't recall getting requests to not post those. And I think being an open and competitive process, it's helpful for people to be able to read the evaluations of successful projects as well as projects maybe that fell below the line.
Most definitely. Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to check in on that. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? All right. Not seeing any. I'm going to pass the baton to Dan for the last agenda item, please. You're on mute, Dan.
I know. I'm sorry. I'll pass it right over to Eric Hartstein, who's going to be leading that one on the preview cohort 4 implementation FIP application review process. Eric?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. For the record, Eric Hartstein, Policy Coordinator here at OWEB. So I'll just kind of briefly walk through the Focused Investment Partnership, or FIP, program and the application review process for the cohort of FIPs that will be starting in this biennium. So the process itself, I think, includes some important changes from last time. So they're still consistent with the administrative rules that govern the program. But as we walk through this, I'll be sure to highlight what those process changes are. So the applications will be due on October 16th. And over the summer, we had 6 consultations with interested partnerships. And we're probably looking at 5 total applications that are going to be submitted. So we're currently developing an expert review team to evaluate the proposals, with reviewers with expertise in each of the FIP ecological priorities that we expect to have applications submitted under. So it's dry type forest habitat, habitat for native fish, coho habitat, closed lakes, basin, wetland habitat, and sagebrush, sage steppe habitat. And we expect the review team to be meeting sometime in mid-January. And at that point, we'll have the reviewers provide both strengths and concerns according to the established evaluation criteria. And here's a place where we will be doing things a little bit differently, is that we will not be asking for high, medium, and low ratings for each of the criteria as we've done in the past. And instead, at the conclusion of the reviews, we'll be asking the expert reviewers to rank each of the applications, so that leaving the meeting, each of the applications will have a 1 through, if there's 5 applications submitted, 1 through 5 ranking. And similar to the open solicitation grant program, this will be included in an evaluation that's provided to the applicants and also to the committee. And then we will work to have a actual work session scheduled for this committee sometime in February. And we're looking at this as not a public meeting, but rather something that will be purely information sharing. So no deliberation by committee members on the applications or the evaluations. Instead, we'll just be walking through background information on the program, including the evaluation criteria, go over the evaluations, which at the time of the February work session may still be draft at that point, in order to really help the committee members craft questions of which to ask the applicant partnerships at a subsequent meeting. So that meeting will likely occur in March, and we'll have committee members assigned as the lead to each of the applications. And of course, even if you're not a lead on an application, you'll still be encouraged to ask questions, which were developed at the time of the February work session. One area that's different from last time is that we will not be providing questions to the applicants ahead of the interview. So that would be a much more kind of organic experience and a better conversation to have with the applicants if those questions were not provided in advance of the interview. So at the March meeting, committee members will then deliberate on a funding recommendation for the full board to consider. This will be based on the expert review team rankings as well as the interviews. So taking both those into consideration at that point. And in the March meeting, staff are also really interested in hearing committee members' preference for the interviews occurring either in person or virtual. So they were virtual only last time, but we feel that there is potentially richer conversations that can be had in person. Of course, it is kind of a more challenging endeavor to get everybody together in a meeting space. But along those same lines, if it is in person, staff are exploring offering a stipend to partnerships to allow for travel purposes. So the very final step in this process would be for the committee recommendations coming out of that March meeting to go to the full board at the April meeting, where the awards for this biennium will be made for the FIP program. So I'll stop there, ask my FIP program colleagues if I missed anything before opening up to any questions. Okay.
Questions, Barbara? And you're on mute, Barbara. See, it's not just me.
Thank you, sorry. Eric, I really like the having one committee member be the lead on the application. I think that's real smart. And it'll help, I think it'll help the process. So you talk about a work session with the committee members. Will the applicants be able to listen in on that since it's not going to be a public meeting?
No, the idea is that this would be a information sharing between the OWEB staff coming out of those review sessions and the committee members. Again, just want to reiterate, no deliberations will be made at that point. We will help with formulating questions to ask the partnerships at that open meeting that would occur the following month.
Okay, thank you. And then I really like the idea of you exploring stipend. I think that's it's a great area to explore. So thank you.
Wait, Barbara, I didn't catch that. Of adding what in? I'm sorry.
Stipend. They're exploring adding a stipend in for these if they go in-person review meetings.
Thank you. Other questions from committee members? I'd just say thank you. I mean, I feel like I still have kind of I don't know, some kind of scars from that last effort of reviewing and ranking these, and it was a really, really hard thing to do because we have so many good applicants, and I really appreciate you guys thinking about how to improve that process and coming up with this. I think it's going to be a lot more helpful for this committee to do that really challenging work of sorting through all the info. So thank you very much for that. I thought I might have had another question that I jotted down. For the questions that we are going to come up with, is it going to be the same questions for each applicant, or are they going to be kind of tailored, or kind of a combination of the two? I'm just kind of curious because of that whole kind of competitive piece of it, and we can talk about it when we have that work group meeting, but that was kind of.
Yeah, I think in general they're going to be tailored, because a lot of times the questions are coming out of the individual applications. There may be a question or two that is rather universal though. So
okay. All right. Anything else on that topic?
It would be good to just get a sense for the committee members on the virtual versus in person. You know, we're debating it a little bit as staff, but it would be good to get your input. We don't have to probably make a decision right now. We have time, but moving forward.
Lisa, you have a hand up, and then Lindsay.
Thanks. We don't have a chat function, and so I just wanted to say thank you for attending. I need to sign off to head to an appointment. So I'm leaving a little early, but I didn't want to just leave without letting you know where I was going. So see you guys. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Lisa. Lindsay?
Yeah, my question is, where would the in-person meeting be? And apologies if I missed that.
Yeah, we've talked about, well, one, we tried to find a central location to all the potential partnerships that may be applying, and that's rather challenging. We're thinking about Salem, but are definitely open to other options as well.
And Eric, would it be sort of like, so 5 applicants, would it be like a one day trying to bring all 5 in for the same day, or would it be, I mean, the logistics of that is just sort of, you know, 5 different days or all happening on the same day sort of a thing?
In the past, we've done it in a day and a half, but that was with probably twice the application. So I think we could probably get this within a day.
Okay. Yeah. Barbara?
So this in-person process is not for this grants committee. That is for the review committee, right?
No, it would be for the grants committee. The grants committee interviews.
Okay.
When we ask them the questions that we come up with.
Right. Okay. All right. I got a little confused there. Sorry. I mean, I'm all for in person, but I'll go with what the majority is comfortable with.
Mark?
Yep, kind of on the same wavelength as Barbara. But, you know, it's always better to meet in person, but it would be confirming the date and everybody's schedule. Probably easier to meet virtually to everybody's schedule, but in person is always a lot better to, you know, look around the room and have a chance to talk and those kind of things. So, but I can go either way. So whatever you decide is fine with me.
Thanks, Mark. Liz?
I agree with Mark as well. And I just think there is something about being in person, getting a feel, being able to, be a little bit more spontaneous in this really important decision piece. So yeah, agree with that. If it's not somehow disadvantageous to people who really can't travel.
Thanks, Liz. Chris?
I just wanted to also express my support for meeting in person. I'm definitely willing to do that.
Thank you, Chris. Lindsay?
Thank you. Yeah, same. I agree with everybody. Would definitely go for meeting in person, but happy to do virtual. And then agreed on like it's difficult to get everyone's schedule. So for me, the sooner the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Eric Hartstein, how's that sound for feedback? It seems like there's consensus on doing it virtually, trying to get it scheduled as soon as possible. And my only thing would be to, to make sure it's not too much of a hardship for these applicants to get to Salem from wherever they're coming from.
Right. And just to clarify, I think I'm hearing that the folks are leaning towards being in person. And that's where I think that also the stipend piece might come into play for the partnerships. But yeah, we definitely would have some logistics to work through on our end. But I hear you and Lindsay and others on trying to get this scheduled sooner the better. So thank you.
Okay. Barbara?
Eric, where in the budget would the stipend come from?
I think on the operation side, we have a little bit of money for that. It wouldn't be too much to get 5 partnerships for an overnight, we think.
All right. Anything else on this topic? Eric, can I ask you for one last favor on this topic, which is when we kind of report out to the full board about, this is sort of a big piece of work for this committee to review these FIPs. And you gave a lot of information and a great timeline, and I think I captured it all, but if you could have a timeline put together that we can share with the full board, that would be super helpful, I think.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. All right, Barbara, you want to wrap it up with our last agenda item, which is just the good of the order, I think.
Yeah, I was like, I don't have anything else on my agenda. I was like, you know something? I know you were on this at the end of last week, so thank you. I appreciate you staying alert on this agenda or on this particular meeting. Mark, you have your hand up?
Well, I just have one good of the order item for those who've been around a while. You remember the Prouty Creek Ranch and Trout Creek that flows through Prouty Creek Ranch, and we put some money into the purchase of that. And I can't tell exactly, but there's a fire, pretty good size, 1,600 acre fire right now on Trout Creek, and it says it's on private and BLM land right near Highway 97, and that purchase borders Highway 97. I've been trying to look up the map to see exactly where it is, but it might be burning on the property that we helped purchase. So, and sometimes the fires are good too, though. So there's pros and cons. So just thought I'd let you know that and kind of watch in case you're interested. Just an FYI item.
Thanks, Mark. We'll take a look at that and see if our property that we invested in is impacted.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we wrap this particular grant committee meeting up? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thanks everybody for your time today and your expertise. And I look forward to seeing you all in October. October, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Bye, everybody.
thank you. Bye.